Well, I've done my video on my issues with the car, which were pretty hard to find, honestly. Getting to 5 issues was surprisingly difficult, and the majority of them were not really issues or minor trivialities. And that's because this car is extremely good. There are very few things wrong with this car, very few things that need changing. Number one being the sound. No, that doesn't make any sense. I know that a lot of people think the older model is louder, and I'm still not sure if it is or not. It definitely was when I first got the car. I think that may have just been part of the car's breaking in. I'm not sure what mechanical function that would be, whether it's getting a bit of soot on the cats or loosening some mounts up or what, I'm not sure, but it definitely seems a lot rowdier now than it did when I first got the car. This is the worst possible way to get where I'm going. But yeah, after a few thousand Ks on it, I've done 2,500 Ks now, approximately. It makes plenty of noise. It's not quiet, that's for sure. I'm still not 100% sure if it's as loud as the outgoing model. It's been a while since I've been in one of those. I test drove one before I got this, and it was obviously very loud. But then again, who knows if that was just because it was loud compared to what I'd been driving at the time. What I had been driving was a Golf R, which isn't loud and it's not quiet, it's just sort of in the middle. The obvious most important trait when people think of RS products is performance. And this definitely doesn't let the badge down, that's for sure. This is faster than the previous generation Audi R8, the V8 obviously. So that means that in the space of about 10 years, Audi's fastest car has been outrun by their cheapest RS car. I think that's pretty damn impressive. I think the best thing about the performance of this car is that it's very usable. It's not just ridiculously overpowered. You can actually put your foot down in places. It does have a very small amount of turbo lag, but it's not really an issue. You don't feel like it's getting in your way. It doesn't feel like it's hampering the experience. I think a lot of people don't realise, especially if they haven't driven a lot of turbo cars, that there are kind of two kinds of lag. You've got lag as in where your turbo comes on boost in the rev range if you're at full throttle. So that's the typical one where people experience, big turbo 2J Supras, stuff like that, where they put their foot down and nothing happens for 3,000 or 4,000 RPM until it spools, and then suddenly you lose all your grip and crash into a tree. And then the second kind of lag, it doesn't matter where you are in the rev range, or it's influenced by it, but it happens everywhere. And that's how long it takes for the turbo to spool. If you're driving at steady state, just kind of idling, cruising along, and you put your foot down, how long it takes for the turbo to spool for any given rev range. This car has, so let's have a look. Third, we're doing about 55 kilometers an hour. We'll drop it down a bit. So about 50 right now in third, doing just over 2,000 RPM. So it took about 1 second there to reach pretty much full boost. It still was only doing 2800 RPM, so it wasn't nowhere near the peak torque and peak power of this car. But you don't really need to be near peak torque and peak power in this car for it to get really, really hustling. Oh, yep. So it hits full boost in about half a second, I'd say, about half a second at 3-ish thousand RPM. And once you get above 3.5, 4,000 RPM, the boost is just pretty much instantaneous. Okay, so 4,000 RPM, you can't feel spool. You just can't feel it. It doesn't feel like turbo spool. It does have a bit of a lag to it, but it feels more like a synthetic throttle lag. Like they're dampening the throttle response, probably for a number of reasons. Managing how the turbo spools is potentially one of them, and drivability and comfort would have to be another one, I'd say. But yeah, it's no. You don't have to wait for your power or your torque to kick in. That's for sure. I did notice when I got the 86 back in the day that it had noticeably more throttle lag than my old 4AG in my Corolla, and that'd be because it's got an electronic throttle. Now, there's nothing wrong with an electronic throttle from a technical or mechanical perspective. A lot of people misinterpret the fact that because it's electronic, it's bad, but that's not the case. It's just that they've programmed in a level of softness, or they tween between different throttle positions so that you get a smoother transition. Now, I understand, especially in the 86's case, that I personally would rather have 0, just give me my throttle, or maybe have it switchable with a mode. That'd be great. But yep, that guy's just pissing right there. That's reasonable. Wow. Well, that'll probably end the video for today. Awesome. Eight and a half hours later, and ready to get back to the conversation. Yeah, so throttle response in cars that have an electronic throttle isn't limited by the fact that it's electronic throttle. The servos that they use to actuate the throttle have the ability to respond in just a few milliseconds, tens of milliseconds. So it's not an inherent issue with the technology. It's based on how they're programmed. One thing that a lot of aftermarket tunes do is change the throttle map or the throttle damping value to make the throttle more responsive to the pedal. So changes in the pedal will be more quickly reflected in the throttle itself, which obviously feels snappier and feels sportier. But the downside is you might get a bit more of that, low speed joltiness, or it might not feel as smooth. In terms of the RS3 specifically, it doesn't feel laggy, it doesn't feel too damped. It kind of feels what you'd expect for any kind of car that has a decent sized turbo on it. It doesn't feel like it has a big turbo, but you can tell that it's got a reasonable sized one on it, both from the spool time and just simply the fact that it makes a lot more power once you get on boost. I don't think the engine is purely turbo dependent though. The 2.5 I think would do quite alright in NA form, which is good because that's what you want down low, between say 1500 and 3000 RPM, when you're not really going to be able to make any boost. You want an engine that's going to provide you enough torque to feel comfortable getting around town. and this easily does that. How surprising, an SS Commodore cruises straight through a red light. A number of people are concerned about how this car handles. There were a lot of reviews for the old car that stated that it had quite a lot of push understeer, and so one thing that's been putting people off buying one of these cars or trying one is that they're concerned it's going to understeer too much and be a problem. I haven't really been able to push this to the point where I felt understeer that has detrimentally affected its performance. I haven't done a huge amount of extremely hard driving, especially in corners. I've been to a track, but I wasn't really allowed to push the car there. And I've done a bit of mountain driving. A little bit of a wiggle there. Wow. Yeah, I was going to say. It's amazing. Which I would say that I probably pushed reasonably hard there, but again, it's not really the kind of driving where you can fully explore the limits of grip when you've got a cliff on one side and a rock wall on the other. That being said, to all the limits I have tested it, it feels very neutral. It doesn't feel at all like it's heavily understeery. Definitely doesn't feel oversteery. It doesn't feel like the 86, of course, not surprising there, being all-wheel drive. But it definitely doesn't feel like a problem. It doesn't feel like a front-wheel drive car with too much power sort of thing. I'm pretty confident that if you were to push the car properly, you wouldn't really be able to get power oversteer. Or at least I wouldn't expect it. If it did, great, that'd be tons of fun to try, but it's unlike cars like the 86 where you can go sideways at 20 kilometers an hour with no effort. This car, you really do need a lot of space and a lot more power being sent through the wheels, and you couldn't really do it on the public roads. Would be a really terrible idea, I think. Seating position in this car is very good. I have legs that are a bit too long for a human, and while I am a bit bunched up compared to what I probably should be optimally, it's much better than the majority of cars. It's got quite a lot of telescoping range, so the steering wheel can come out nice and far compared to a lot of cars. In most, I find that I just have my knees right up against the wheel to be able to get my arms to the correct position on the wheel. Whereas this one, I've got my wrists pretty much on top of the wheel and my knees are a good inch or two away from the wheel. One thing that seems to be prevalent on a lot of Audi/Volkswagen cars is the seat bolstering almost gets in the way with your hands in the correct position. So if I hold my hands at 9 and 3 and I'm at about 9 degrees of lock, my elbow hits the seat. Not terribly, but it does slightly. It's a bit annoying. Another feature that is surprisingly ungimmicky the more you drive the car is the digital dash. It's really good. It doesn't feel distracting like I imagined it probably would. It just works. You get used to it very quickly, and then even getting into my wife's car, the Skoda Superb, which is a brand new car pretty much, it feels like I've stepped back a whole generation of cars just because it doesn't have the digital dash. I don't really use all the features on it all that often. I don't sit there flicking through features too often. But I'd say I would use it enough to make it worth my while. Being able to flick between my current settings, which has right now I've got the G meter on the left just because it's silly and funny, and the power and torque meter on the right for exactly the same reasons. I can hit the view in this mode and I can see my fuel economy, which is currently 20 litres per 100k. So it hasn't gotten any better since I first got the car. And it tells me stuff like what my oil temperature is like. I can also switch to the map view if I'm trying to find somewhere and I need a slightly bigger version of it than the secondary screen. Having two map views is actually super handy as well, because you can have one on sort of like a zoomed out view and another one that's a lot more focusing on the roads that you're currently driving on.